What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. So Riot recently put out a dev blog on behalf of the Champion Update team that goes by the name of the State of the Champion Update. And it was packed with really just a ton of new information, some awesome stuff, and one of the main things to touch upon from that post is of course that the rework of URGOT has finally begun its development, it seems, or at least is very close to approaching that point, and he's definitely confirmed to be one of the upcoming reworks in the future. And you know, we have talked a decent amount about the URGOT rework in the past before, and every time we've talked about URGOT in the past, we've talked a lot about the disparity in his kit as the main thing that Riot has an issue with. For example, you know, URGOT has this appearance of like a terrifying monstrosity, but instead of using, you know, his creepy mechanical legs to chase you down and stab you with his knife hand, he actually just stays at a distance and fires ranged attacks off like an artillery kind of character. He's also really bulky, which suggests that he has the appearance of like a really tanky champion, but for the most part, URGOT players are a lot more focused on dealing damage than soaking it up. And the issues really don't stop there. I mean, everything about his thematics and gameplay is really just confusing overall, like how he's kind of a Noxian that looks like he's from Zon, or the fact that he's a ranged champion that has an ultimate that swaps him into melee range into the enemy team instead of, you know, synergizing with the artillery playstyle. And all of these big contradictions in his kit have been the big major reason that an URGOT rework has actually never been completed so far. You know, Rioters have been trying to make it happen in the past for a long time actually. You know, I think URGOT's been attempting to have a rework done for him for at least a few years now, and we've heard about quite a couple of scrapped kits that just didn't make it. And really it meant that his reworks never made it past the conceptualization phase into actual production. But of course the good news is that it has finally happened now. Riot has decided on their direction to take URGOT, which means that they can finally start getting started producing his visual and gameplay update. Now that the direction has been settled on, the rest of the process is actually going to be a lot more straightforward. URGOT's messy thematics and gameplay kind of forced Riot to decide, you know, which parts they wanted to keep and which parts needed to be thrown out, which means that a lot of his iconic design is actually going to be kept around, and all the stuff that disagrees with that design, with those features, are going to be removed and replaced with something that better suits the direction that Riot planned to take him in. Now, that's not really a small task because it does essentially mean that Riot are cutting URGOT in half and rebuilding that second half that they're throwing out from the ground up in order to create an actual cohesive package. Riot haven't yet announced exactly what mechanics and design choices are going to stick around and which ones are going to go, but from what they've said, it seems like it can only really go one of two ways. You know, for starters, URGOT's appearance is really likely to stay on the theme. You know, the idea of this mixture between a man and a machine isn't necessarily new to League of Legends, but the more terrifying take on it that URGOT has always been definitely super unique and pretty cool too. That's not to say he's going to stay as a fleshy machine crab. You know, Riot have kind of always admitted that his current design doesn't really do the theme justice, but he is definitely guaranteed to stay as this like Frankenstein monstrosity almost, with a bunch of like horror elements tied into his design. URGOT's update is going to be a full-scale visual and gameplay update, of course, so we can't expect that this is going to mean everything's going to be brand new. You know, he's going to get a new model, new textures, new animations, updated skins, new splash art, and of course new gameplay. You know, really just whatever it takes to make him nice and horrifying. He might actually stick around as like this crab looking dude but just be updated and modernized, but it could mean that he's also kind of reimagined as a champion and ends up having maybe his machine elements built into him in completely different ways that still result in him looking kind of humanoid, maybe kind of similar to the bad guy from the Echo Champion trailer, I guess. Either way, his narrative's gonna get some healthy updates so that he better fits into the world that Riot have spent a lot of time developing over the last few years, and that will definitely be reflected in his new appearance. So of course, the most exciting part, let's talk about his gameplay. You know, when Riot decides a champion, they like to make sure that you can figure out how they will behave in game from their actual appearance, or at least so that you can draw inferences of it, which means that, you know, tanky champions look really big and bulky and kind of slow, and mobile champions tend to be a lot sleeker and slim and, you know, kind of have like a very quick and agile feel for them. Same goes for melee versus ranged champions too. You know, melee champions tend to be unarmed or have like big weapons like swords or spears. And of course, the ranged champions are going to hold some bows, hold some firearms, stuff like that. And this is where URGOT is really failing as a champion, since he totally looks like he's this tanky, very slow melee champion. And as his ultimate suggests the same thing too. But of course, he is actually a marksman character for some reason, which leaves Riot with two major choices when it comes to his gameplay. They can either keep him on as a long-ranged artillery champion, or they can completely revamp him and turn him into a melee champion instead, actually. And since they want to keep the terrifying, fleshy machine theme intact, that gives the rework two pretty defined directions that Riot could go with it overall. They could either build on his current theme as this walking artillery hero, and turn him into like this grotesque tank sort of champion, more of like a literal tank actually, not like a, video game tank, the machine that moves slowly, sits in the back, unleashes, massive artillery damage from a distance. Alternatively, they could go with the more humanoid appearance, similar to maybe the guy in the Echo trailer, I guess, and pull the terror elements from the thought of this massive, terrifying abomination chasing you down and trying to absolutely murder your face. There are convincing arguments for either side. For example, the URGOT concept is pretty strong because there's nothing really like it in the game right now, and being unique is something Riot values a lot. Whereas a big scary dude running at you isn't actually all that unique. It's kind of covered by Scion and actually quite a few other champions too. On the other hand, having a really horrifying champion that just sits in the back and doesn't actually get in your face is kind of lame, because you're maybe wasting his potential as being this really scary champion. Either way, Riot Meddlers made actually quite a lot of interesting comments about URGOT's gameplay rework that are definitely going to help suggest which of these two directions Riot are going in the future. First up, there's the issue that URGOT's actually pretty binary right now. He lands a grenade, locks on with the Acid Hunters, and that's actually kind of it for his gameplay. There's not a whole lot of counterplay or interaction outside of just dodging the Noxian Corrosive charge, and it's not particularly interesting to play because all you do is land one key ability and just spam Q a bunch of times. And you've also got the huge issue of the ultimate just completely not making sense with the rest of the kit, and as well being a much better fit for tanky melee champions compared to a ranged character with a lot more kiting power. And multiple Rioters, Riot Meddler included, have actually gone on record before to say that they actually do like the design of URGOT's ultimate, but it just doesn't fit his kit, so they are more than likely going to remove it and replace it with something else actually. They also mentioned that they'd rather put this ultimate ability on a true tank character rather than like an aggressive bruiser, simply because bruisers prefer to kill things, whereas URGOT's ultimate is a lot more about locking a target down, helping your team kill them, which is definitely something more suited towards a pure, a true tank character. Historically, in the past, Rioters have always lent towards the removal of URGOT's ultimate actually, rather than the removal of his ranged kit, and since it would pretty much have to be one or the other, that's definitely going to be the biggest indicator that they're probably going to stick, or almost certainly will stick, with the ranged concept of URGOT, rather than turning him into a full melee champion and eating into Scion's design space. And as well, when Riot mentioned the removal of his ultimate in the past, they also did mention that they would probably find a melee champion to fit that ability onto instead actually, since they were surprisingly big fans of the ability itself. And the recent ability on Warwick's rework, his E, Primal Howl, is surprisingly similar to URGOT's ultimate in terms of the way that it works. Both reduce the damage you take, both fear the enemies around you, with the exception of the target hit with infinite duress, which acts as the gap closer and triggers the area of effect fear. Either way though, those similarities with Warwick could actually be the biggest piece of evidence yet that Riot is going to stick with a ranged basis for URGOT's gameplay and design, since maybe they have already found a new home for his original ultimate. Either way though, it does definitely feel like they're going to keep URGOT as a ranged champion. He's definitely going to get a new ultimate to boot, and I'm definitely very excited for the upcoming future rework of URGOT. Either way though, that's just about going to wrap things up for URGOT's future rework for now. Definitely let us know in the comment section below where you would maybe like Riot to take URGOT's rework in the future. Either way though, looks like that's going to be it for me. If you guys enjoyed the video, drop a like, subscribe if you want. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.